Welcome back to the Forge. Today we're going to be doing the first official episode of the season where we're going to be talking about that violence. How violence never starts with a punch. And of course, here today is my co host Jason Matthews, and I'd like to welcome you to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, this is going to be a good one, I think.
Yeah, I mean, violence. It's something that happens. It's a domestic violence. We hear a lot about it. It's it comes in many forms, and it is a real serious subject to talk about. And you know what? There's more to violence than just the physical attributes of it. And so yeah, as we dig into this today and get real with it, there's a lot to bring up with it. So I'll pass it over to you to kind of start things off for us, Jason.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so this is something that I probably am one of the stronger subjects that I am able to speak on with authority. Um, just to give you an understanding of why, I spent 10 years in the military. I've also studied the psychology of violence in depth, including studying with someone who literally wrote the book on on violence and the physiological changes of violence. Lieutenant Colonel retired Dave Grossman. He wrote two books on killing and on combat, both of which I think that every man should read. Those are both books that every man should really understand because it's about as much about understanding the emotional and the physiological cost that comes with violence as the actual violence itself. Violence itself is simple. It is aggressive action that takes place in order to control, restrain, or defeat someone else. And it is that that action of doing something to another person, and whether it's domestic violence, whether it is some kind of unfortunate action. We hear a lot about school shootings. We hear a lot about things that go on, bullying, assault, muggings, whatever it might be. It's all classified under violence. And what's really important is to understand that there's always a ramp up. Things don't just kind of happen. They don't just pop off. There's this ramping up that happens. And biologically, there are things that happen within the human body that have to occur for a person to commit to violence or to actively defend oneself and others against violence. There are things that happen within the body that reallocate resources because your body has to be efficient in the way that it does things. It has to be efficient in the way that it responds to reality and how it reacts to things that are happening. And there's a great quote that says, "You will always fall to your training in times of stress." And so, the way that you train and develop yourself is going to determine what you do. If you have no training, you're probably going to freeze. You're probably just going to stand there and see what violence is happening, how it's going to affect you. Not the best strategy, but it is a learned or a conditioned response based on who we are as people. It's an evolutionary response, not something you're necessarily trained for, but something that happens because if you stay still and don't seem threatening, the belief is you're less likely to have violence visited upon you. Not always true, but it is definitely a sound philosophy for reptiles and for other life forms that we have kept as we've evolved into human beings. And if you have training, you have the ability to either flee or even if it is if it is appropriate to fight, which are mammalian responses. These are the things that govern all mammals. So from your cocker spaniel all the way to your human being, these are things that govern all mammals. And the understanding of how these conditions set up where understanding how you train yourself, understanding what you look for, and understanding what is happening that has led to something that happens that can become violent. It does a couple of things. It allows you to understand how you can, one, mitigate that violence to keep it from actually happening, and two, if you can't mitigate it, how to properly prepare for anything that might happen that could end up being violent.
Yeah, what when you say like things that we've been trained for or conditioned for, like these are experiences that we've had throughout our lives. You know, whether they start from early childhood and our experiences through how our parents raised us, through experiences you've had at school, and other things that you grew up around, that create that subconscious imprint, I guess you can say, in your mind, that lead to, like you said, that fight, flight, or freeze kind of responses many of us experience. And and the really truth is like, yeah, those things that those we experience as our childhood do play out long term in our lives. And a lot of people who have very violent tendencies oftentimes experienced abuse of some form in their childhood that has led to some kind of psychological disconnect in their minds and stuff like that. But it also could play out too in how we role play, I guess you could say, in our day-to-day relationships, especially our primary relationship with our spouses and stuff like that, where oftentimes I know for myself, I find myself mimicking a lot of how my dad responded when my mom got aggressive and stuff like that. It wasn't, and my mom was never really a physical abuser, but she yelled a lot, she screamed a lot out of her hurt, out of her pain, and stuff like that. And my dad was very quiet and very disconnected, and didn't fight back a whole lot, at least, but at times he did. And I found myself being in a similar situation when my wife got heated and aggressive verbally and stuff like that. I shut down emotionally and things like that. So these are all things that I've experienced through my relationship, and I'm sure many can relate in theirs. And like as we shared earlier, like abuse or violence isn't necessarily always something physical. Um, because there's emotional manipulation, there's all sorts of different ways that violence comes out, as you shared. That is to for somebody to kind of try to take power away from another person, right? It's an act of aggression in many different ways. And so there's also some myths here that you wanted to talk about and stuff like that in some of the things that can be very dangerous for us to believe in.
Yeah, well, one of the biggest ones is one that we actually didn't have in the notes, but something that must be talked about is that everyone is capable of violence. Everyone is capable of doing something violent. To think that you aren't, well, that's a lie. As a human being, you have the capacity for violence. It all depends on how much you're pushed. The amount that you get pushed determines um, how violent you become. But really, um, when looking at that, there are a bunch of myths that are created because of the false narratives that we create. As men, we think that we're supposed to be capable. So if something's going to happen, then we'll know what it is. Before real danger happens, oh, I'll be able to see it. And again, you fall to your training. So if you haven't been trained to identify that something is going to pop off, how are you supposed to know? You will instinctively react. Your body is going to understand, but you won't know cognitively. Your cognitive understanding is the slowest thing to come about. Your instinct is much faster. Before you actually know it, your body's already responding. And if your body's already responding and you don't have any kind of training, it's too late. So for you to say that you will know when something is going to happen, that is that is an illusion. It is an illusion that is going to set up um, a disastrous outcome. Another one is the belief that the belief that you can that by being reserved as a man, you are under control, or that you are in control of your situations, and by helping other people feel comfortable, violence is less likely to occur. This is a lie, and this is one that um, Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about a lot. The idea of a man being someone who is just accommodating, they are not so they're not a man to be taken seriously. They are a man who is weak, and weak men will always be preyed upon. These are the ones who are victims of violence, because a man has to demonstrate that they are potentially dangerous. Men are meant to be potentially dangerous. It is the ability to control that danger that makes men civilized, but it is the necessity to have that violent tendency and then have it under control. So if 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 there is something that is going to happen and you aren't prepared and you aren't someone who has conditioned themselves to respond to violent situations. I mean, beyond the military, I've also had over 20 years of martial arts experience as well as boxing and other things. So I've been conditioned to understand threat and to deal with it both physically and socially. And when the social things collapse, you have to be willing and able to respond physically. If you can't, then you are a liability. And that is a truth. If you can't respond effectively, you are a liability. And this is another myth that you can diffuse everything through social interactions, or you can just engage with someone and then diffuse the threat. That's not possible, because violence comes from a extreme emotional state. And as human beings, we are emotional creatures who justify our experiences with logic. And through that justification, we have to think about what we're doing. Whereas with emotion, we're just acting. Violence is an action. So we are dealing with emotionally charged people who are aggressively seeking to blow off the steam of that emotion and do so in a way that's going to end up with harm of someone else. There is no thought here. So you have to be willing to act in a way that does not require thought, it requires action. And the moment that you ignore signals that tell you that something could become violent, if you ignore those things, you put yourself and others in danger. Your loved ones, friends, family, whomever. If you are in a situation where you can understand the signal that something's going to happen, and you do nothing, you put people at risk. So it is extremely important to understand where the violence comes from, and to understand what is going to the violence is, what the potential violence is, and how to respond to it. And that takes practice. That takes understanding of people as well as the capacity to do something about it. And that takes practice. It takes training.
Yeah, and I fully am on board with you there, because you never know when a person's breaking point is. You know, I can think of a couple of experiences from my youth where I lost it. Um, One was in junior high. We were in gym class, and I was being picked on, bullied, and stuff like that. And my one of my best friends at the time decided to get in on the action. He threw a basketball at me, hit me in the head with the basketball, and that was my snapping point. And next thing you know, I'm throwing punches at him, and you know, we got the whole gym class fight, 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 as the gym coach was out of the gym at the moment, and then he comes back in and he pulls us in there and he's like, "What the heck's going on?" Right? And I was actually more upset after the fact than than anything, because I was like, what brought this on, right? And because I lost kind of control of myself in that moment. And the other time was in high school, and it was on the rugby field where the game was getting aggressive. Guys were throwing cheap shots during the game, and I was on the wing at this point in time, and a guy got past me, and he went and got the try. And as he went down and got the try, I tripped over him, and he got up and he grabbed me, put me in a headlock, and clocked me one. I blacked out, and a few minutes later, my teammates are pulling me off of him because I'm on top of him throwing punches, and I'm like I have no idea how I got from being in a headlock, receiving a punch, to now turning the guy and having him on the ground and being on top of him throwing punches. But I mean, that was exactly what you're talking about, where that snapping point happened, emotion and all that stuff was there, and I lost myself in that moment. And that, to be honest with you, that scared me when as a teenager, like not realizing that somehow I flipped the script on that and became violent in that few moments, blacked me out, right? Like I was like, I didn't physically see what I was doing. I was just responding and reacting out of whatever was there. And that scared me to the point where I became, in a sense, overly passive, because I didn't want to get to that point of anger, and that has led to me also then being taken advantage of a lot throughout my life, because now I was like suppressing all those feelings for so many years, and I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm not going to let this bother me, I'm not going to let this fire me up or whatever, because I don't want to go back to that response where I'm going to get violent like that, because somebody could have got hurt seriously in that moment, right? So yeah.
And you're highlighting a very real problem, because when people get to that point of being violent, oftentimes there is this shaming or this punishing for that response instead of understanding. And I know that very, very well. Whenever I've been in a situation where again I felt the need to defend myself or to act violently, and I was told that what you did was wrong, it was bad, instead of seeking understanding. It messes a person up. And this is one of the problems that we have in society is men are being told they are not supposed to be aggressive. That's bullshit. And if it calls for it, then it needs to happen. And it needs to happen in a way that is not going to necessarily put someone in a dire situation or in legal trouble or whatever, but it needs to be something that is going to be definitive. Because the reason why violence usually happens and why some people are targeted for violence over others is when people believe they can get away with something. When I was teaching self defense, the thing that I always taught is that a perpetrator wants to avoid three things. They want to avoid getting caught, they want to avoid getting injured, and they want to avoid being identified. And they will do at least two of the three things, avoid getting hurt and avoid getting caught, as much as possible, because either one of those things mean they can't continue doing things the way that they want to. And so they're going to find easy targets, people that they believe are going to be someone that they can easily manipulate or bully. And it happens slowly. And when we recognize it, by the time that we recognize it, it's already too late, usually, because we are reacting to situations. And this is why it's so important to understand how threat begins and how it turns into violence. Because by understanding the anatomy of violence, you can begin to understand how to mitigate it, how to avoid it. So the first thing that happens is there's a boundary violation. Something that happens, someone does something where they test your ability to defend your boundaries. One thing I talk about a lot, especially in the um, in the bold men coaching program that I offer, is the idea that you have to have healthy boundaries. But having healthy boundaries means that those boundaries have to be defended. If you're unwilling to defend your boundaries, they aren't boundaries, they're mere suggestions. And suggestions don't matter. So someone is going to test your boundaries. They're going to find out what you permit. And that boundary testing could be something as easy as disguising disrespect as humor, or bending the rules just once to see how you respond, or pressure testing um, how you react or respond just softly, just enough to get some kind of reaction out of you. And if you think back to a time when you might have been, if you were a victim of bullying, like I was, like probably how Jason was, or most men are, you're going to see how this applied in some way, how this um how you can see yourself in one of these things, how someone disrespected you or violated a rule that you had and did something even though you didn't want them to, or whether um, they said or did something just to see how you would react. And if they got the kind of reaction out of you that they wanted, they knew that you were a soft target, and they responded accordingly. And so the reason why a bully or a perp or someone is going to act in this way, because they want to make sure that they can not get hurt and not get caught. So they're going to find an easy target, someone who is going to permit them to do what they want to do without harming them. It also isn't going to tell on them, isn't going to report them, whatever. So they're going to make sure that they understand a soft target versus a hard target. A hard target is someone who's going to defend their boundaries and is going to become confrontational when someone does this shit.
Yeah, and we can really see this a lot, even in like family dynamics and stuff like that, right? Like it could be the man, you know, using some of this stuff towards his wife, but it could also be the other way around, where the wife does the things to him as well. Like it works both ways, right? Both people, both male and females, are capable of acting this way and pushing those boundaries and stuff like that. And yeah, it starts off like you said, harmless, right? Like that little poke, that little jab, or oh, you didn't really mean that, and then they just kind of, you know, do something that kind of, and you're like, well, I didn't, I don't want you doing that, but okay, and then you actually start defending them in some ways, right? Like that reverse psychology comes into place, and that's not healthy either. But yeah, it usually does start off very slowly in the sense that what you said, right? Because they are testing the waters. They are, and then as they realize, well, okay, this guy's not going to stand up for himself, so they're going to start pushing harder, and start harder, and stuff like that. And we got to be mindful of our own actions too when it comes to be men and stuff like that, because we may think that we say that harmless little joke about our wives and stuff like that to our friends and stuff like that, and we may think it's harmless in the time, but it's actually creating an environment where she feels disrespected and harmed and stuff like that, and which could lead to her, putting up boundary, or putting up her guard and all that sort of stuff, and could cause that trigger point, right? Like because women are very much capable of acting out of violences and stuff like that because of that of their whatever they're responding to, right, emotionally, and stuff like that. Uh, so it comes from both sides, and we gotta be very mindful of that. Not only how we are acting towards others or our spouses, but also being mindful of looking at the signs that they're giving towards us as well.
So there are a couple of interesting statistics that come from uh, especially from the in the U.S. They have documented um, instances of how violence, especially domestic violence, happens. And what they found is that 75% of cases where there is one-way violence, meaning that one person is violent towards the other while there is no repercussions, 75% of the times it is women that are being violent towards men. And they use this exact same formula. They pressure test, they find out where the weaknesses are, and then they attack those weaknesses. Men, for the most part, want to be good. And men want to provide, they want to protect, they want to create an environment that promotes peace. Women are chaotic gremlins. And so the likelihood of them creating instances where they're going to test this boundary, and I'm speaking from experience here, where they test this boundary and then they see where the issues are and then they pounce, are very, very high. And I know this because this is the dynamic my wife and I used to have, where she would see things in me that she didn't like, and then she would exploit them. And it wasn't until I actually began really reinforcing my boundaries, and I told her, "This is not acceptable. You will not do this." That she stopped, and we actually started having conversations. It is not the fact that men create violence. I think men create the environment that aggressive behavior can happen, and then they respond to it poorly. And that is what we as men really need to stop doing. We need to take responsibility for the kind of environment that we are creating in our household that allows this to happen in the first place, by having weak boundaries, by not having strong communication, by seeing how things are going to unfold if nothing is addressed. That is what men really need to be mindful of. That is where we can actually take the most, um, the best positive action to create something different. When we see that people around us, whether they be men or women, where they test, pressure, pause, and then observe the response, where they're looking at, okay, so I'm testing the boundary, nothing's happening, great, I'm going to push a little bit more, and then I'm going to push a little bit more, and before you know it, they are becoming way more. They're becoming a problem, and they're doing things that are actually actively creating um, problems for you and for them. By being able to see this pattern, you can interrupt it. You have to interrupt it. It is your job to interrupt and say, nope, this is not happening. We are not doing this. And then give the give the response, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to ensure that this behavior is not acceptable. Full stop.
Yeah, and yes, like it does start with strong, healthy boundaries. Like with the many different men's groups that I've been involved with, or men that I've talked to and stuff like that, who have issues with, say, their wives being aggressive and stuff like that. It's because they're having a hard time maintaining their boundaries, and they allow things to slip. And I think one of the this can kind of almost go back to a myth that but it has to do with our boundaries as well, right? Where there's that silent almost undertone that, well, men are just supposed to take whatever the woman throws at you, right? We're supposed to be that solid person who, is to allow our women to be a chaotic mess emotionally and all that sort of stuff, and she can throw all the darts at us and everything, and we're supposed to be just this shield that just is supposed to absorb it all. But that's not really the truth of where it is. Like if any person in any relationship that you're with is overstepping boundaries, treating you poorly, and stuff like that, it is your responsibility to set that boundary. It is your responsibility to say, you know what, I am not going to accept this behavior. And that could be from a parent, that could be from a spouse, that could be from your child, that could be from a friend, that could be from even a stranger, co-worker, whoever. It doesn't matter. It is up to you to say, you know what, like, once you can just kind of say, okay, well, I don't, maybe you don't know this person, but if it's a regular pattern that you're noticing in this person, you've got to say, you know what, no, I'm not going to accept this behavior. And, and you got to vocalize it. You can't just be, just can't say, well, yeah, I'll just ignore it, but I got the boundary in my mind that it's not going to affect me. That doesn't work. Um, it's got to be stated, it's got to be clear, and it's got to be enforced.
Whether you know the person or not is irrelevant because this is a pattern of human behavior, and it's being able to recognize the pattern of pressure testing, pausing, and observing. And people who do this, they're not going to use force right away because that creates attention, and they don't want attention. They don't want to draw attention to themselves. They want to make sure they have access. As long as they have access, they know they can do whatever whatever they want. They could be the fox in the hen house, so to speak. And they're looking for that compliance so they can escalate. They basically they're looking for you to give them permission to treat you badly. When you think about it, if you allow other people to do this, you have given permission for that other person to treat you badly, and this is a boundary that we have to create. It doesn't matter if it's a man, a woman, a friend, a parent, a spouse, a coworker, a total stranger. It doesn't matter. The kind of behavior is a pattern that can be seen and it can be addressed, and it must be addressed because this kind of behavior is not acceptable at any level, and it has to be dealt with. Because by the time it gets to the point of being verbally or even physically abusive, it's too late. You have provided them the access to act this way. You have allowed them to do this, and no one wants to hear that. But because they have pressure tested the situation and they have seen where the boundary can be pushed, you have permitted them to act in this way. And that is what needs to change. The ways in which we, as men, create and defend our boundaries has got to increase.
That's very true. I mean, and that's at all levels, and yeah, and so because it starts like you said, it starts in very soft ways usually. Like unless the person has gotten away with it for a long time and they're very outward about it, most people started off very slowly, and that includes, when you think of, and I know this isn't, but it is a form of violence. When you think of sexual predators and stuff like that, that is a violence, and usually, especially when it comes to children, the children who are sexually violated are violated by people closest to them. Uh, like like it's like 90% of the time or something like that. I can't remember the statistics specifically, but it's usually somebody close to them, like a relative or something like that. And it usually starts in these soft forms as well. And because they'll get close to the person, they'll do things that don't necessarily overstep a boundary, but they do overstep a boundary, but it's a very soft boundary, and they build a trusting relationship with the person that opens up to more stuff, and and that's what you're talking about here when it comes to, like, the other forms of violent aggression, whether it be verbal or physical abuse and stuff like that, right? They do that those small tests. Yeah, okay, I'm going to say this whatever, and um, I'm going to, I'm going to, you know, push this person or whatever, right? Like, it won't be something overly dramatic, but it will be something that will just kind of be like, okay, yeah, this, they didn't respond. Okay, I can take it up a level, and and that's what you want to avoid.
Right. And this whole idea that by staying silent, you're being mature it's a cop out. It is it is the permission that you're giving to someone else to do harm. And what I do want to circle back to what you're talking about about sexual violence because this is a specifically um, heinous kind of crime. And it has nothing to do with the idea of sex. It is all about control. And it is this idea of can I control this person? Can I dominate this person and assert my control over them? And again, it follows the exact same patterns before, gaining access, making sure that they can do what they're going to do without someone saying something, trying to hurt them, or trying to um or getting them caught. As long as those three things can be achieved, don't get identified, don't get hurt, don't get caught, then they're going a person who is wanting to relieve the stress through violent means is going to. And so it becomes a responsibility. As far as children go, this is a special case because we're talking about a class of people that cannot defend themselves and rely on the trust of others in order to survive. And so it becomes particularly important for men to be able to advocate and defend their children and to do so in a way that ensures that no matter the cost, they're able to ensure that the children are protected, no matter the cost. Because we're talking about a class of people that cannot protect themselves, they cannot defend themselves, and so they must be advocated for and defended, no matter the cost. Take that as you will. And it's really important to understand that when you are staying silent or when you are permitting as an adult, when you are staying silent and you are allowing things to just happen, you are being permissive in your own violence. You are allowing yourself to become a victim. Let that sink in for a second. You are allowing yourself to be a victim. And this is going to create a lot of discomfort in people as they hear this because no one wants to see themselves as a victim. People want to believe that they are the best versions of themselves, and that's not always true because you are either permitting yourself to act in a way that is going to defend your boundaries, or you're permitting yourself to have other people tread on your boundaries. Either way, it's a choice.
And that is the hardest thing for a lot of people to recognize is that we do play a role in every part of our lives. And one of the challenges that we face in today's society and culture as well is that we're taught to blame others for everything. And I'm not saying that you know um, the person who is abusing you or acting violent towards you or anything like that um, isn't to blame for their actions. They are responsible for their actions. But what Jason is talking about here is you're responsible for whether you choose to stay and allow those people to continue to do those acts of violence for you. And I believe they call it Stockholm syndrome. Isn't that what it is? Where people who are in abusive relationships and stuff like that, they they stay in the relationship because they're so dependent on the person that is abusing them and acting violent towards them that they can't see themselves in a safe situation outside of that, even though the person is actively abusing them in many ways. And that's when the silence hurts. And I mean, I I fell into that trap. I don't like often like talking about um, the things that happened in my relationship and stuff like that as I was married, but I was silent for a lot of it because there was a lot of um, emotional and others and other types of abuses, I guess you could say, that happened in my relationship. And yes, I do take responsibility for the fact that I didn't set up the boundaries that we talked about earlier in the relationship. So I do take responsibility for that part that I wasn't protecting myself in that way, and stuff like that. And but that doesn't negate the fact that she chose to do the things that she chose to do, just as it doesn't negate the fact that I chose to react or respond the way that I did. And so that's the hardest part of any of this, you know, because there were opportunities where I could have, you know, while we were in marriage counseling, I could have been more vocal about the things that were happening in our home, and you know, could have potentially had that some of the stuff addressed through those times. There's definitely areas where I could have increased my boundaries and stuff like that, right? To do this, I could have sought help, and how to accomplish those things, to do all that stuff. But I chose to be quiet about it, and and that didn't help. It actually made things worse. And that's the challenging thing, is now that I'm outside of that and I'm looking at it. Okay, well, yes, okay, now I'm taking responsibility for how I did that. Now I can look at ways through the things that I've been learning outside of the marriage on how to be able to be more understanding of how I can react differently, how I can have boundaries set in place to uh, to prevent that from happening, and um, and also I don't have to be quiet about it anymore, right? Like I can talk to other people about this stuff and not feel shame around it, because that's the other thing that comes up when it comes to this is you know, nobody likes to admit that, you know, things like this are happening in their home, and and that's part of the reason why men are silent in this, is because they're like, well, I'm supposed to be the man, I'm supposed to whatever, and so when this is happening in my home, uh, there's shame around it because, well, I'm not addressing this properly, and it's happening, and it's not supposed to happen this way.
So I think it's more about control than it is about shame, because there's no honor that's involved in this. When you're looking at the ideas of shame, or of guilt, or of fear, you have to look at what the opposite is, that is creating that negative emotion. There's always an influence that creates negative emotion. So, and this is true societally as well as individually. So when you're looking at guilt, the thing that establishes guilt is law or rules. If you have broken the rules and you feel guilt, and you're supposed to feel guilt so that you don't break the rules again. If you feel shame, it's because you've done something dishonorable. Honor is the thing that actually prevents the feeling of shame, or that induces the feeling of shame if honor has been violated. And then there's fear. What creates fear is the need for control. And the reason why men have been conditioned to not speak up is because there is this control that makes them afraid of overreacting, or afraid of social friction, or even afraid of being wrong too early. They're conditioned to believe these things. And through that conditioning, they have developed this belief that if I am if I overreact, I'll be seen as bad, or I'll be rejected. I will not be honored. And that's what creates the shame, is the fear, and the conflicting beliefs between needing to assert oneself and the fear of of being seen as overreactive, or being seen as creating social friction, which is a laugh in itself. Anyone who believes that, I mean, they have allowed themselves to be controlled anyway. Or the fear of being wrong too early. Who cares? We're supposed to be wrong. That's how we learn. And the idea that we have to fit in a certain box. No, human beings don't fit in boxes. We're dynamic creatures. We're supposed to act dynamically. Yeah, feelings get hurt. So what? When did sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me? Stop being true. These are some things we have to really get back to. The fact that, yes, We're going to be wrong. Yes, people get offended. So what? It's what happens. Deal with it. If you aren't willing to ruffle feathers, you are not living your life. You are not growing. There's this quote that I saw or that I heard on a TV show. It's kind of morbid, but it still fits. That evolution is built on the bodies of the past, which is very true. We evolve because of suffering. That is how we evolve as a species. We suffer, we learn, we adapt. And we have to be willing to continue that same process. Yes, we're going to suffer. Yes, we're going to be cause of other people suffering. So what? You adapt to it, you understand where you went wrong, you better yourself, and you do better. But the idea of not wanting to act in order to prevent the emotional reactions of others is dumb, because we have to be willing to break a few eggs to make an omelet. You have to be willing to mess it up, because you're going to. Failure is a guarantee. But it's by learning from how we fail and doing better. That's how we better ourselves as people, and that's how we better ourselves as a species. We have to be willing to learn from mistakes, which means we have to be willing to make mistakes, which means we have to risk offending other people. Offense is Being offended is is not a war crime. It's something that just happens. People get offended all the time because we all have different expectations, and those expectations constantly are being unrealized. And the more expectations we have, the more we can expect to be disappointed. But we learn from those things. And unless we're willing to learn and grow, we're not going to be fulfilled. We have to be willing to risk living to enjoy life.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Like, you know, that's one of the things that is also one of the challenging things that people deal with every day is this idea like, oh well, you know, well, you know, it's hard to put in words sometimes because I kind of laugh at it. You know, you look at some of the humor back in the day that was done through comedy or movies and stuff like that, that they just really don't do anymore because of some kind of social, oh yeah, that's offensive or whatever, right? Like, so easy to offend people today, it seems. But when it comes to this here, what we're doing is what we're talking about when it comes to violence. Like, yeah, you know, we have to learn from our mistakes. I had to learn from my past relationship, right, where I didn't stand up for myself, where I didn't have those boundaries and stuff like that. And I say, okay, well, now I know better. And going forward in my new relationships, the idea is that I will recognize these patterns sooner, and I will be, you know, basically putting a stop to that sooner. And if the person gets offended or upset about it, well, that's their problem. That's not mine, because I'm not going to accept that sort of behavior in my life anymore. And that's important. That's important for everybody to understand. Like, you don't have to continue to fall back on old patterns. If you're continuing to fall back on old patterns, then you haven't learned the lesson. And and you have to be willing to look at yourself. You have to be willing to look at the patterns that you have lived your life by. And not only just look at them and say, okay, yes, this is how it happened. You then have to take the next steps and say, okay, what am I going to do differently? What did I learn from it? And what am I going to do differently as a result of this?
Yeah, you have to be willing to do that. If you aren't doing that, then you aren't living. A great book that I have read over and over again. It's called Polyvagal Theory and Therapy. It the opening sentence is, the goal is to fall in love with life and enjoy the risk of living. And it is both parts. Fall in love with life, knowing that life is a risk and that you are going to fail often. You are guaranteed to fail in some way. That's a guarantee. So the idea that you were going to succeed in everything, get that out of your mind, you narcissistic person, because you are not going to succeed in everything. You're going to fail forward. You're going to fail at everything. And it is how you learn from that failure that you're able to proceed and grow. They're able to progress. If you aren't learning from that, then you can't enjoy life because you can't fall in love with the risk of living. The risk is knowing that you fail often, all the time, but you fail forward. You keep going because life was never meant to align with your personal perspective, your very small, very narrow perspective. No one cares about that. Only you do. Your job is to understand how to take that perspective, learn from how you fail, get back up and do better. And I know that I'm getting kind of keyed up about this, but this is something that is really it's something that I find very important. It is the most important lesson in life that I had to learn the hard way. And anyone who feels like they are a victim of life, that life isn't moving forward for them, then you are falling into that exact same trap. You believe that life is supposed to cater to you. What makes you so special that life would cater to you specifically? You have to learn from the things that you've done wrong in order to know how to do it right. And then, even though you do it right, understand that you're still going to fail, but you fail forward. You understand how to progress better. You never meet the mark, but you're always getting closer to it. And then once you get close enough, you set a new marker anyway. You're literally moving your own goalposts, but you do so because you know that you can proceed, you can grow. And that is what growth takes. It takes you being willing to get close enough to know that you have done something significant and then set a new goal and work towards that, knowing that you're going to continue to strive, you're going to fail, and you're going to continue moving forward because that's what it takes. And the only reason why you wouldn't do that is because of how your mental models are have been trained. The way that you see the world and the assumptions that you have made don't align with the need to continually making progress. And that's a you problem. That's something that you have to deal with. You have to be willing to change your mental models, or else you will always get what you've always got because you're always doing what you've always done. Unless you're willing to change that, nothing's going to change. The thing that you can change is where you move forward from how you've been trained as a child, the social conditioning that you've been built under. If you're anything like me or many of the other people that I see, I was at the supermarket yesterday, and I swear to God, there was this woman with a child who must have been like 5. He had a little card. They have these cards that say customer in training. It's a great social conditioning thing. It's kind of funny. But this child was literally banging his cart into the different kiosks and the shelves and whatnot. And the mom was just like, "Stop it! Stop doing that." It was everything I could do to stop myself from grabbing the kid's cart and say, "Knock it off." It wasn't my place to do that, but if I in that moment I had to weigh, is it willing creating a confrontation in this moment? And it wasn't for me personally. But the impetus was there to want to just grab the kid's cart and then give that mother a lashing. But it was a supermarket, and the way that it would have been perceived, I know that I would have been seen as in the wrong. And the question you have to ask yourself is the juice worth the squeeze? In that moment, the answer was no. The juice was not worth the squeeze. So I just kept my mouth shut. But this damn kid, this is the kind of social conditioning that we are dealing with. Mothers who allow their children to act like assholes, and then wonder why they grow up to be adult assholes. And then
Yeah.
other people who want to do well meet these kinds of people, and they don't do what's necessary. Say you're not allowed to do this, and then if that creates a confrontation, fine. His reality, his understanding of the world does not mean that you get to be permissive. You are not allowed, or you should not think of yourself as being someone who should allow other people to just run roughshod over your boundaries. It is your job to say, no, that doesn't work for me. And either just cast the person out of your sphere of influence, out of the way, out of your day to day, or confront that person in a way that's going to help him understand that what he's doing is bad. If it comes to violence, make sure that you are able to address it in a way that reasserts control of the situation, not control of the person, of the situation. And those are very different outcomes. That's a podcast of a different topic. Anyway, the the moral of the story here, because I think I've gone a bit of a tangent. The moral of the story is, in order for you to be someone that is effective, you have to have these boundaries, and you have to be willing to defend your boundaries, and you have to be willing to let go of the fact that yes, or you have to resign to the fact that yes, you're going to make mistakes. You're supposed to. You're going to fail. That's part of life. And also give up the conditioning that says you're supposed to be quiet. You're supposed to just take it, because you're not supposed to take anything other than what you want to take, other than what you believe is acceptable for you. And that is something that every man has to determine for himself. What is it that you want to permit because it's going to further your goals? And what are you going to defend to make sure that you are treated with someone with respect? Because respect is not given, it is earned. And you have to show yourself as someone who's worthy of respecting. You do that by developing boundaries and defending them. That is the primary way that you do that.
Yeah, I believe that's probably one of the most important things out of this particular talk today when it comes to this is I mean is that idea of boundaries. I mean, we can't stress that enough. And that yeah, as Jason said, it's like, what are you willing to permit yourself to deal with, right? Because the more you allow, whatever you're allowing others to place upon you or whatever, to violate whatever boundaries, that's on you. And that's the true reality of it. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't like to acknowledge or accept. And that's the hard thing. And and I mean, part of that too is comes through our conditioning as well from our childhood, is we don't recognize how, because when we're children we don't know how to place boundaries, and so oftentimes our boundaries get violated as children, and and stuff like that, and so we don't understand how to place boundaries as we get older and stuff like that. But that still doesn't give us an excuse, because as we get to be adults and stuff like that, that is part of that learning process that we also talked about as well, where okay, I am now an adult. I see things differently in life. I now have the choice to uh, learn how to create boundaries for myself, to learn how to implement those boundaries and keep them, you know, not only as something that I hold to myself, but I'm actually able to vocalize. I'm actually able to say, you know what? No, you're crossing the line. I'm not going to accept that, and stuff like that, right? Like we do have a voice, and we do have the ability to articulate that, and that's up to us to do that. And you know, like you shared with that situation with that child in the shopping center, you know, again, like, you know, it's there's a lot of social conditioning factors in that too, right? Because parents are afraid. I mean, I even remember as a kid, you know, I remember my mom talking about, even when we were a kid, when um, you know, discipline was, you know, more commonly accepted as, a spanking and stuff like that. There was still always that fear factor that was always put into the fact of social services being called and your children being taken away and all that kind of stuff. And that, yes, there is a fine line between, strong discipline and abuse in that sense as well, and I recognize that. Um, but it basically, it still comes down when you're parenting and you're teaching your children about behavior issues and stuff like that. Um, you know, it's up to us as parents to also teach our children those boundaries, and it's also up to us as parents to teach our children how to set boundaries not only for themselves but for um, how they behave and stuff like that.
When I was growing up, my father listened to a lot of classic rock. Well, what I would now call is classic rock. And one of the bands that he would listen to is Crosby, Stills and Nash. And there is one song that I think is very apt that needs to at least the chorus to um, go over, which is teach your children well, your parents' hell will slowly go by. And this is the well, actually, the second part of that is teach your parents well, your children's hell. And this is about the understanding of what your children go through and what your parent, what as you as parents go through, and being able to accurately teach your children what you've been through, how you got through it, and what strategies you used. If you aren't doing that, you're not doing your job as a parent, especially as a father. That's really important because as men, especially when we're developing our sons, it is so important that they understand what we as men went through. This is something that, by and large, isn't done. I think that um, I'm not gonna go through the race debate too much, but I understand it. There is some of this done in the Black community where it's more so for understanding how to survive, but still, the understandings of what men have gone through when they're able to impart that to their sons, it creates strategies of how to survive. But imagine if all men were to do that with their sons, not just to survive, but to learn to thrive, where they're able to just impart all the knowledge that they have in order to help raise strong men, turn their boys into strong men who can then go on to raise strong children of their own. It's really important. And the ability to do this requires men to understand how they have failed and how they have learned and how they have then created better strategies through that continual failure and use those strategies to just become better, not succeed, because that's success is more of learning from a string of failures in order to do better. That's really what success is. And the way that men do that is they really they teach themselves how to see the patterns and then how to address the patterns early. As a man, you have to take a more cynical look on life. You have to see everyone as a potential threat. That's the first thing you have to do. You have to see everyone as a potential threat, and they are a threat until they prove themselves otherwise. What this does is it creates a bit of vigilance in you as a man, where you're able to then see people for who they really are, because you don't care who they are until they give you a reason to care about them. You see everyone as a potential threat. And then through the interactions, you understand that whether they are, yes, a threat, or no, they are not a threat, and I can develop a connection with this person. But you have to have your guard up initially. You have to ask yourself, is this man or is this woman a threat? Are they going to be a threat to my time, my um, my capacity, or my potential? And if the answer is yes, get rid of them as soon as possible. If not, then interact with them until they show themselves to be a threat because you always have to have that in the back of your head. Is this person going to be a threat? The answer is yes, everyone has the potential to be a threat, which is why you have to treat them as a threat. Because I said in the very beginning, everyone is capable of violence, every single person. And you have to treat every person as having the capacity for violence at any time. It all depends on how far they are pushed and what they're willing to permit before they snap. So by understanding that everyone is a potential offender, not that they are an actual offender, but they have the potential to do so, you see them for who they really are. You see them as someone that can create a problem for you, and you are either going to interact with them in a way that's going to lessen that likelihood, or you're going to see that they're going to increase that likelihood and you're not going to be there for that. One of those two options. And you have to be willing to see the patterns of this because you have to notice when they are testing, how they are testing, and what response they are looking for to gain access, to gain compliance, or to gain compliance from you, so that they can continue doing what they want to do and they can treat you in the way they want to treat you. So you have to see them as a potential threat and you have to see the pattern of how they are acting and what they're looking for permission for. And then shut them down where you need them where you need to.
Yeah, those are very valid points to bring forward, right? Is to be, I mean, we want to be trusting of everybody. There's a part of us that wants to be trusting of everybody, and that's understandable. I'm that kind of person. I want to be trusting of everybody, but I've also learned that, you know what, that's not always the case, right? Like there are people who are always looking to take advantage of you in some way, or are looking at ways where they can manipulate or control you. And the only way that you can prevent that is by being diligently aware of their actions, as Jason was sharing, right? Like, so you have to be mindful of that. And it doesn't mean that you have that completely closed door or the complete wall. Um, but, but it's about, okay, do I have a bridge that can be built with this person, or a drawbridge? That would be probably a more accurate depiction of it, right? Like, because the drawbridge can be retracted or can be extended, and that's I guess the way you can really say you're wanting to look at it in that sense is you have that boundaries in place, but you also have the ability to extend the bridge or retract the bridge depending on how the person is uh, is treating you.
And the bridge should always be retracted for the start. Always. Keep people at arm's length and only give them access when they have demonstrated the fact that they can be trusted and they're willing to create connections of trust that work both ways. You can trust them, they can trust you, and you can build a relationship on that because all relationship is built on trust. Trust is the name of the game. And trust must be one of those things that you guard safely because trusting the wrong person is what puts you in situations where you have people in your life that treat you badly because you have trusted the wrong person, given them access, and allowed them to act in ways that are against your better judgment or against the ways that you want to be interacted with. It's important to understand that, and I think that this is probably the best way to wrap it up is to really hit this home that you can't openly trust anyone. You have to see everyone as a potential threat. You have to be willing to see the patterns, and then only trust those that have demonstrated their ability to be trustworthy.
Yeah, that I mean, yeah, that says it quite clearly, right? Like, just be mindful. Always be looking for those patterns and understanding what those patterns are, which is basically they usually start soft. They usually look at easy ways to poke at you to gain access to further aggression later on. And so being able to recognize that early and put up the boundaries early and put a stop to that early is the best bet to avoid it and and to um, yeah, to avoid the violence. And so really it comes down to, again, yourself, and take responsibility for your own actions, and learning through as you go, because it's not always going to be cut and dry. But but as long as you are aware, and as long as you're taking responsibility for your actions and stuff like that, you can prevent it. And you can prevent a lot just from that alone.
You will save yourself from 70 to 80% of the stress that you currently are dealing with simply by doing these things, by seeing everyone as a potential threat, by giving access to only those who have demonstrated that they deserve your access, and by understanding when and how people are testing your boundaries to see what they can get away with. Those three things would probably do more to preserve your peace, increase your confidence, and make you feel like you have the permission to do what you need to do to succeed than most anything else. Those three things.
And with that, I mean, this was a very heavy topic today, as I mean, it is something that we've all experienced to some form or another. And our hope and desire is that we're not going to shy away from these challenging topics, and we want to address them head on and stuff like that. So we thank you again for your for you being a part of this show, by being our audience and listening to us. And and we'd love to hear from you as as we continue on with what we're doing. What your experiences are with stuff like this. And if you are in a situation where you are experiencing violence in your home and stuff like that, seek help, right? Like, get help. And uh, and if you have to, remove yourself from the situation, right? Remove yourself from the danger. And if there's children involved, that's even more important, because they themselves do not have the ability to defend themselves as you do. And therefore you are responsible to be their defense. And so that is my encouragement to you. If you are experiencing these things, do what it takes to um, remove yourself from the situation, and do not escalate the situation with more violence, because that doesn't help.
If you find that you are having trouble self-extracting, make sure that you surround yourself with a community of people who can help you with that. People that you know that you can trust. If you don't have those people, see how, if there is anything around you that can help with resources to create that kind of community. Because oftentimes the reason why we don't make change is because we feel like we are alone and it's hopeless. And those are the two beliefs, the two illusions that we create for ourselves when we feel like that we can't reach out to anyone else because of the fear that we're going to be judged or that we're going to be seen as someone who is either should be able to make a change and doesn't, or is lazy or whatever. It's never about laziness, and it's never about what you should be able to do. It's what you're capable of doing in that moment. So surround yourself with the people that can actually help you make those changes, because that's the support that you get from others can sometimes be the biggest blessing that helps you take the risk to make the change, and you're worth taking the risk.
Definitely, 100%. And so with that, we're going to say goodbye for today, and we look forward to being a part of this journey with you, So, yeah, with that, bye for now.